to.
Yeah, we're on in progress. So, Katie, welcome to Dr. M's Vodcast. And you are the second guest of honor, but I'm really honored that you accepted and gave consent. Yeah, that is namaskar for us. And my wife was wondering why I'm doing this. So that is continuing learning, yes. But thanks to you. The subject that we picked up of supporting and sustaining continuous improvement process, the thought came, and you see that I'm not put implementing. Everybody implements it. The whole fun is how do you continuously improve the process, and you support it and sustain it. How do you scaffold it and sustain that improvement, and not it's a one-time thing, which you have also spoken about, and that's what we are emphasizing. And the series is going to go right up till March 2022. So, Katie Anderson, if it looks very odd that me introducing you, but I now give it to you, so you can introduce yourself slightly to all of us, and we know you very well, so you're not a stranger to us. However, for records, Katie Anderson, over to you. Please introduce yourself.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. So happy to be here and continue the conversations that we've had offline, and now be able to share them with everyone in your network and my network too. So I'm Katie Anderson. I'm a leadership and learning coach, author of the best-selling book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, which we're going to talk about a lot here today in this session. I am based in the San Francisco Bay Area in California in the United States, but I'm a global citizen, having lived in 6 other countries over the course of my life. I work with leaders in their organizations to lead with greater intention so they can create learning organizations by uniting purpose, process, practice, and people. So really excited to be here today and to dive into some of the things that I have learned deeply through working with Mr. Isao Yoshino, a 40-year Toyota leader, and creating the book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn. So excited to be here today.
Incidentally, how did you get the title?
So I had a few working titles, actually. So the first one was practicing Hansei meaning self-reflection or reflection, because the meta experience of creating the book was one of helping Mr. Yoshino reflect on 40 years of his career at Toyota, as well as the fundamental practice of reflection is where learning happens. But then I ended up deciding to move to a secondary title, which was a part of how I was structuring the interior of the book, about we're all leaders and we're all learners at different stages of our lives. And this is where this comes in. Mr. Yoshino always talks about this chain of learning. And I love that concept, that we're all links in a chain of learning, and we're leaders and we're learners. We may be just one step ahead. How do we help someone else move to that? And how can we learn from the experience of helping other people learn and develop too? So even while we're leading, we're still always learning as well. And so that's why it's learning to lead and leading to learn. And part of the leading to learn concept is the only secret to Toyota, as Mr. Yoshino would say, is its attitude towards learning. So we need to lead.
I have it on the screen. The only secret to Toyota is its attitudes towards learning. Profound. Yes, and really profound.
It is, and you know, I moved to the back context of how I even got to spend all this time with Mr. Yoshino is that my family and I moved to Japan in 2015, and we lived there for all of 2015 and half of 2016. I had met Mr. Yoshino at a conference, and he had said, "Come visit me when you move to Japan." And I did, and what I thought was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience turned to be this wonderful relationship. And I was really deeply interested in learning from him about what makes Toyota so successful, and why so many companies around the world want to emulate its culture, its concepts of Kaizen, what we've translated to be lean in the English language. And he kept saying, there is no secret, there is no secret, except one day he made this comment that the only secret perhaps is its attitude towards learning. And I think this is something we often forget. There's a lot of focus on tools, there's a lot of focus on the visible aspects, but what's underlying all of that is how do we learn more effectively so that we can create greater value for our customers. So, even Toyota says we make people while we make cars, or we make people so that we can make cars. And so it gets back to developing people, learning, and that the output is a result of focusing on that learning and development.
Katie, I read your book at least 3 times.
Oh,
And when I wanted to pick up, I said I don't have that much of time, or for a podcast. And then when I read this is to revitalize the managerial capabilities. I said, yes, that's what exactly that we want for supporting and this thing. And therefore, I came to this concept of getting CanPro, because that's the middle management level that we are focusing CanPro, which I'm sure you will deal with it as we go forward. This definition, I'm sorry you cannot read the whole thing, but it says that Toyota's Hoshin Kanri and Kanri Noryoku, I'm pronouncing it right? Kanri Noryoku, yeah?
Close, yes.
Is one of the major reasons why Toyota continues its goal consistently with all its employee involved. So, I thought this was something to do with what I was looking at to support and sustain the movement. And therefore, I picked up just this one chapter of yours, which is a case study, the first case study that you presented on CanPro. And this, I'm sure you will cover it up. So I wanted to talk about the CanPro movement and what do we expect from it. And I hand it over to you. So this is what got me on.
Great. Well, so for some context for everyone here is CanPro was a Kanri Noryoku Program, that's shortened to CanPro, was a 2-year leadership development program that Toyota started at the end of the 1970s. And they saw that senior management saw that they had a problem. Actually, they had 2 problems. One was that there were major quality issues of their cars coming off the line. And then they dived into understanding what was contributing to that. And one of the root causes that they determined was that their management team, not the executives, because they had been at the organization for a long time and had worked with Dr. Deming, but the management team, maybe one generation below them, weren't as familiar or with or practicing as much the concepts of Kaizen, of continuous improvement, of really understanding what their Hoshin Kanri or strategy deployment process was all about, that there was more siloed thinking happening across the organization, and that there just wasn't good communication happening across the organization. And so the senior leadership, so yes, in this image, you can see that the top executives, they knew the type of culture and management practices they wanted, but they were seeing that more of these senior managers and the middle managers perhaps weren't as practiced as they wanted them to be. And so, and everyone in the organization, as this shows, was involved with Hoshin Kanri. They decided to focus this management development program on a few thousand of its up and coming middle managers who they saw would ultimately become those top executives. So really investing in the management practices, management culture that they wanted at Toyota. And that was the genesis of CanPro. Mr. Yoshino was in his middle career at the time. He was in his early 30s and had an incredible opportunity to be one of just a few people chosen to help support this learning and development program. And so he has some real amazing insights into the structure of the program and also from working with these senior managers for 2 years on learning how to be a leader at Toyota. And so many people don't know about this program, and it's really what he considers to be what embedded the culture that we know as the Toyota way into Toyota's, way of being. If I could share a slide, I think this would also help anchor.
Take it away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where is, here we go. So every time I've talked to Mr. Yoshino, there's 3 main things that he's emphasized. And I've really taken this to be what I now call the, excuse me, the leading to learn framework of leadership, that there's really 3 essential points of a leader's purpose. And ConPro emphasized all 3 of these. First, it was that leaders need to know how to set the direction, how to clarify goals, choose the vital priorities, and communicate that. But then second,
can I hold you there? Can you hold it there?
Yes, please.
Now, when you say set the direction, and we already know that you have category. That's my Labrador. Okay.
Yeah.
The Labrador's name is Phantom. So it's time for his food. So he goes off. So when you said set the direction, and you said leaders, because in your book you said you got leadership at all the points. You have got it vertical and horizontal leadership. You have defined it as a mindset, and whoever can influence becomes a leader. So when you say that leaders' purpose set the direction, in the hierarchy that you have mentioned, is it the top management that you're talking about, leaders in the top level that you're talking about?
So I am talking about at all levels. So leaders within a management role in particular. So at the very top of the organization, it is the senior management, that top executives, to really set the direction for the organization. However, within each sub layer of the organization, it is that leader's responsibility to say, if this is where we're going, this is the direction and how my organization, the things that we need to do to achieve, to be able to fit into that. And perhaps if your senior leadership hasn't clearly set the direction, trying to at least set some goals and some challenge or some clarification or unification of activity in some direction for the people within their span of influence or reporting as well. So
is that the reason that you said that the top management, the senior management, you said their prior, the biggest responsibility, I'm just paraphrasing it in my words, is more to look after the human resource part of it and develop the human part of it. That's what I read in your book. It is not of, once they set the strategy, the emphasis should be on developing their subordinate colleagues.
Correct. So this is the
right?
Correct. So I think you're paraphrasing a quote from Mr. Yoshino, that as you get more senior in an organization, the responsibility ends up being more people focused, more strategy focused, and more people focused, rather than doing the work. So as you learn in the book as well, there's frontline sort of team leaders and group leaders, and part of their role, and they're working with the people doing the value creation work, is to sometimes jump into the work. As you get higher in the organization, stepping away from the Gemba, the responsibility is less jumping into the work, but more developing the people so that the people can do the work more effectively. So that's what.
Yeah. Do you think that this is very important for the theme that we are discussing of supporting and sustaining the continuous improvement program or process?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if we need all of us to create, so when I say provide support, that's also creating the systems and structures that allow for continuous improvement and develop people's capability to be effective problem solvers. It's not just saying, I'm going to set the direction and tell you exactly what to do. It also doesn't mean I'm going to set direction and not provide any support to help enable you to be successful in working here. And so to create a continuous improvement culture, people need to know what's the target, what are we trying to achieve? And then they need the ability to be able to problem solve, be asked for their input, to have barriers removed, and leaders to come in and check, and not check to be punitive, but check on the process, to ask the questions. What are you learning? What next steps are you taking? What barriers can I remove, so that the problem solving can happen effectively at the right level of the system? So that's when we say provide support, that's some of what I mean. And as we'll explore in the ConPro program, this is one of the critical things that was emphasized, that leaders, it's not just leaders or managers setting the direction and then their responsibility, just they're doing all the work. Part of their role as leaders is creating the systems and structures and support needed for their team to work towards solving those challenges, to achieving the goals. And so ConPro explicitly asked senior managers to say what's their top goal, their top challenge, their number one strategic priority in their area. What were those goals? And then specifically, what actions was that leader or manager going to take to support and their team members to be able to work towards achieving those goals? And that was a very different mindset shift for a lot of those senior managers who were more focused on setting the direction and then not as focused on what they were going to do to help their team members.
Yeah, I read that in your book when Yoshino says a chapter on behind the scene, when they discuss whether the ConPro program should be for 3 years, 1 year, and then they arrived by saying it should be for 2 years. Right?
Yes. Well, that his boss was, joked about how 1 year was too short. People could kind of fake it for a year. 3 years was too long. They might get just like too tired of it, but 2 years was enough you couldn't fake it for 2 years, but you weren't going to get too exhausted by it as well. So that's end up what they structured the program. And so this is around developing yourself as well, of what leaders need to do. And this is really the beginning of ConPro, and they didn't know what they were going to do. Actually, Mr. Yoshino emphasizes they did not hire external consultants. So this was something that the people within Toyota were creating for themselves using their best thinking about how they could solve this gap in management capabilities. So it wasn't solving the gap in the process capabilities, it was solving the gap in the management capabilities.
So when the top executives and senior officers are the people, as you said, were the facilitators for this program of ConPro, and therefore there was a total involvement of them, and the senior manager, general managers, and section managers found themselves to be more symbiotically related to the top management, and they could exchange and communicate with them better.
Yeah. Well, right. So Mr. Toyota, who was the president, chairman and president, said to his top executive team, which were called the senior officers. So, that the top executives, while this program, and I'm paraphrasing as well, while this program isn't specifically directed at you, my expectation is that you are going to be involved by being the coach. So with the role, the senior managers and section managers were expected every 6 months to report out their status, their project, their A3, so their one single page of their plan and their progress, to the senior officers, who were then expected to ask questions, to model the way. As we explore in the book, they made sure to, if the general managers and section managers didn't say how they were going to support their team, they made sure to ask those questions, and they made sure to ask questions that emphasize that it's okay not to always be successful. So what didn't go well? What are you learning from that? What's not on plan? And so really emphasizing that this is how we want you to be asking the questions to your people. So modeling that way and really reinforcing those habits and those capabilities all along the chain of learning within the organization.
So during this course, the senior managers would sort of, the way I hear you saying, empower the senior managers and the managers, empower to the extent that they can experiment, so that even if they fail, the top managers, are at their back. and that's why probably you said in that book, it is fall 7 times and rise to the 8th time, is that you are giving the permission to this middle level managers while you are getting educated into it.
Yep.
You have an opportunity, even if you fail, we are there for you. We are not going to bash you up and have meetings to castigate you. You know, I know, having grown from the shop floor level to a position of director, I know what I had to undergo when every monthly meeting used to be read, that, you know, it's time that they're going to bash me up. So this is an absolute reverse when you empower and said failure is quite okay.
Right. Absolutely. So I'm pulling up a slide of this was what the objectives of the program was. And Mr. Yoshino likes to say every sort of every generation, Toyota would retighten the belt on management capabilities. So this started when Deming came out to teach the Japanese executives and leaders in the 1950s and early 60s about PDCA and Kaizen mindsets and strategy deployment and all of that. And then in the late 1970s, retightening the belt. And then later, there's the Toyota Way came out in 2001, and that was another opportunity for retightening the belt. But again, it was re-emphasizing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so since you mentioned Deming, we are celebrating his birthday on 14th October.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Yep. And as we're recording just 2 weeks before that. So happy birthday, Dr. Deming. So there's so many contributions. But you can see that up here, these were some of the elements that they were really trying to emphasize through the program. They did lectures from Mr. Nomoto, who was one of the senior executives, about what it means to be a leader. They had study groups between the managers to practice writing their A3s, to start collaborating together, and really thinking about how were they thinking in a problem-solving mindset, using plan, do, check, act cycles. How are they communicating and negotiating and cooperating across silos and up and down in the management organization? How are they being clear about setting targets and goals, analyzing root causes, and then how are they developing their people and then sharing that thinking on a piece of paper? And so I think it's a really, what's nice about this program too, is I think it's easier to relate to where Toyota was back in the late 1970s compared to where it is now. It feels so far ahead in many aspects, but all the organizations that we work with, probably closer to where Toyota was there, that needing to really emphasize these management capabilities.
Agreed. So I put this. So here you are. So this is reinforcing manager capabilities. You said you have dealt with this when you prioritize and align the goals. When you say align the goals, is right from the vertical and horizontal. That is cross-functional. While each of the functions develop by themselves, they do not, all the functions develop. The rate of development may be different, or improvement may be different, but then they are all aligned together horizontally and vertically, and their priorities are right, because in this kind of improvement is the senior managers who are the facilitators. So the communication must be excellent. Am I right?
Yes, and through this experience of going through this focused program, it became easier to start communicating together because they had visibility to each other, and so it was easier to create and align those goals. And a manager and it was mainly men at this time, senior manager, they were in the same study session, and so it was this is where the structure is so helpful. And how do we create the space for people to have those conversations and then get into that habit? Because in a typical organization, everyone feels really busy and focused, their heads down in their little area, not their little area, their area. And it's too easy to forget to make those connections. And so how do you have the structure that facilitates those connections and those conversations to happen so that you can prioritize and align goals?
The second point, which is that is to set seemingly impossible targets. It has been stretched. You put stretched targets. Now that's actually challenging the junior managers and the senior managers. And in no way, as I look at it, challenging does not mean that you don't respect them. Challenging actually means that you are getting the best creative thing in them, the creative part of it into the problem
Yes.
solving by challenging them, because the more you challenge them, the more will that creative part come in. And then you have a reinforcement that fair enough, you go ahead, we are challenging you, you experiment, but we are there to support
Yeah, absolutely. I really like this phrase, a seemingly impossible target, because it's not that it is an impossible target, but at first, when first presented, it may seem like that there's no way we can do that. What's important is to set those challenges and those targets that are a little out of our reach, not so far out of our reach, based on what is needed, not just by what we think today is achievable, but something that pushes us to think a little bit more creatively or to experiment and try because we don't know how to get there yet. And it's that's where we get the innovation and really the continuous improvement. Yes. Because if we are just doing things that we know we can do, then why aren't we already doing them? One of the things too is we often are very uncomfortable with this concept of struggle. So there's a little bit of struggle that happens when we don't know how to do something. And so we want to make it easy for someone, or perhaps our compensation systems are tied to achieving targets. Well, then that's a disincentive to be pushing to have more challenging targets. So look at those systems and structures within an organization as well. And having a mindset that it's about what you learn from not meeting your target immediately, that then creates this learning organization. So it has to be okay not to immediately meet the target or even at the end, because that's where the continuous learning happens. So if you have a culture where not being right is you're blamed for that, or it's punitive, then having a seemingly impossible target will not be a good fit. So you have to do both at the same time. Set higher targets while creating an organization or a management culture that knows that the part of the reason we have these challenging targets is so we're learning our way forward and not blaming people for not always hitting the target.
Yeah, and the senior managers have already put the safety net for them, so that even if you fail, you're quite safe with us, because we are facilitating the CANPRO program, right? The third thing is, this is quite, I think it's very nice. I like this. He says, no problem is a problem, and bad news first mindset.
Yes. Well, I'll talk to almost anyone who's worked at Toyota, and they always say, no problem is a problem. And this bad news first is we need to make problems visible, because we cannot address them if we don't see them. So I think you mentioned before, like going out and having, if everything is looking good, well, then we should be like really exceeding our targets and, doing super great. We're probably not. And so if we can come forward with a mentality of bad news, or I'm not meeting the target, or there's a problem or an issue that we need to address, then we can actually fix it or work towards fixing it. And if we don't see problems, and this is the no problem is a problem, if there are no problems that are visible, we know that that's a problem, because there's always something that's not working perfectly as it should be. Or we need to be setting some more challenging targets to move into greater possibility.
The last one, the fourth one that you said is for the daily management, using A3 as a daily management, clear stories and making things visible. That supports the first one of that you are transparent, you can make it possible. And when you make it visible, there may be many angles from where you can get more suggestion and more Kaizen on particular. It can be a point Kaizen, or which would help the enterprise Kaizen to go up. So there's improvement not only at a point in a function at the shop floor, but it would also help the enterprise by itself for improvement. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. And well, an A3, again, is just a large size of paper. And it's a way of synthesizing information, choosing the most important elements, to say and to tell a clear story about why are we focusing on something strategically, or what is the real problem? Here is my thinking of the gaps and what we're going to experiment to close the gaps. It's about making your thinking visible so that you can be literally on the same page by reading and using all the information on one simple page, opposed to, buried in a thick report where you can't see everything. So there may be a report that supports all the information, but what are the key essential pieces of information that need to lie on that one piece of paper to tell that succinct story, or the evolution of the thinking as well. And the managers in the ConPro program were required to use A3 paper for their reporting up to the senior executives. And so this is what really reinforced using A3 as a management practice for communication and problem solving and strategy. It was happening sporadically across the organization, but this, since they all had to do it, reinforced it, and then they trickled down through the organization.
This would also help in, if they go off track, you can have mid-course correction. Because it is made visible, then we go to the point number 1, which is called prioritize and align this thing. So you can have the mid-course correction whenever you want, looking at the visible inputs that you're getting from the A3.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. Right. It supports the plan, do, check, act, or plan, do, study, adjust cycles of learning, and that you need to have check parts throughout the course of the year for a strategy. So you're not just looking back at the end of the year like, oh, did we hit our targets or not? How are we adjusting throughout the year, making status of the process visible so that we can do course correction?
Yeah. On the humorous side, PDCA also means please don't change anything.
No. Perhaps for some, yeah.
No, not in Kanri program anyway. Yeah. So let's see what was the Yoshino's 4 lessons that he learned. Take away, Katie.
Yeah, so these were, as he and I talked, this is the way the chapter, or actually the whole book was written, is not like his thinking came out in one linear way. This was over years of talking and me helping really synthesize the things he said about the program and his experience over 40 years. And so one of the key lessons that he continued to highlight is really this concept that learning can't be delegated. So when he would talk about the ConPro experience that these managers went through, some of the ahas was like, oh, they can't just delegate their subordinate, you call them subordinates, their direct reports to write their A3, because you cannot actually, learning only happens for yourself. So you have to actually put pen or pencil to paper. And some managers would, call Mr. Yoshino's team and say, I don't have time to do an A3 report. They say, well, sorry, that's actually your senior leader is requested that. We're here to help support you. And then they realized through the process of doing it, even though they were grumbling or upset about it at first, that it actually helped them learn and help them then be more effective in working with their teams. And so you can't delegate that learning, and you have to have that experience yourself. You can, help other people learn, but if you're wanting to learn and improve, you have to take the practice. The second lesson, always keep learning. For a young man in his early 30s, seeing these more senior leaders in their late 40s and 50s committing to their professional and personal development. So of those 3, set direction, provide support, and develop yourself, spending the time every month, meeting together in study groups, working on their A3s, going to lectures, and really applying themselves to learn and improve, even though they were pretty senior in their careers, was really inspirational to Yoshino at that stage to see, wow, we're always, this gets back to learning to lead and leading to learn. We're always continuing to learn to lead more effectively so that we can lead to create learning in our organization and the people we work with. The third lesson, it's not about the tools, it's about the thinking process. Again, it's not about filling out the template of an A3. It's not about the exact structure of the tool. Tools are helpful, but it's the thinking process, the learning process that it facilitates. And so the tool is only effective if you're applying it through improvement, through thinking. And so he tells a story about how, one senior manager, Mr. Yoshino didn't think he was sort of filling out the template or filling out the A3 as robustly as he should. And his boss, Mr. Yoshino's boss, said, don't worry about that. He's still fulfilling the important essence of the A3 report. He just happens to not have as many words, but he's making his thinking visible. He's clearly telling a story. So it's okay that there's more, it's not as full of words. And then this person went on to be one of the most senior executives at Toyota. And then the fourth lesson, which I think is really important for managers at all levels and people who are in a role of coach, is that you do not need to know all the details of a process, of an initiative, of an area to be able to support the thinking process of someone who owns a piece of work in that area. So I get asked this question all the time. Well, how can you be a coach to someone either in a leadership role or just in a role called coach, if you don't know what they're working on? And I say, it's really not about me coming in as the content expert. It's me asking the questions to see if they're telling a complete story. And so, yes, it's helpful to have some context, but you don't need all the details. And so where this was reinforced is the senior executives didn't need to know all the details of the work, but needed to know clearly how it connected up to the broader strategy. How are they developing their team? What were the barriers or the challenges that might need to be overcome? And then how were those senior managers articulating that and making that connection? And that was what was most important.
Yeah, and probably that's where you had mentioned in the book that we should stop the telling culture by
Yes.
the seniors.
Yeah. So the telling aspect is setting the direction. Then it's allowing the people who are closer to the work to come up with the ideas and the solutions and the process to get there.
So you tell
ahead.
only to set the direction. After that, you stop telling them and ask them to develop themselves and come out with whatever you want. And
exactly.
you're there to support them.
I want to share this quote too, that was from the book. And this is one of the key takeaways that both Mr. Yoshino had for himself personally, as well as his observation of all of those thousands of senior managers who went through ConPro, is that they discovered or rediscovered through this process that their responsibility as leaders and managers wasn't only to achieve the business outcomes themselves, but also to define how they would support and develop their staff to achieve those outcomes. And this is a really important reminder for everyone that how we really get more effective at achieving outcomes is engaging everyone at the right level to be taking responsibility for thinking, for problem solving at their scope of their level of system or their scope of responsibility, and then making the connections up and down and across the organization.
That is so, Ravi. So let's have your take on this. You had mentioned in passing the impact of ConPro at Toyota, and that you covered up. If you want to add something more to that. And most importantly, what I would like you to tell me is how would ConPro help in our theme? What would the positive impact it is going to have for supporting and sustaining the continuous improvement program? I'm not talking about lean. I'm talking about any of the continuous improvement program, the continuous improvement professionals start up with. It could be anything that they want to start up with. It can be on the mode of a TPM or a TOC or Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma. All the continuous, how does ConPro have an impact on them? Because I don't want them to be left by saying ConPro is only for Toyota Production System or for Lean, but for any continuous improvement program, what would be the positive impact Kanpro will have.
So again, no organization should copy exactly
That's right.
what Toyota did. So Kanpro was a leadership development program that they specifically created to meet the challenges that they were having. However, the principles that underlied the development of that program can be applied to any organization once that organization clarifies for themselves what is the target, what are those management capabilities that we need to be developing, what are those business outcomes that we need to be achieving, where are we today, then what is the gap. So then design the support structures for how you're going to help people become better at developing those capabilities. So that's exactly what Toyota did. And so it can be applied in any organization, regardless of what methodology you're using, because all organizations need to achieve business outcomes. So what are those top priorities? What is the value you're creating? What are those key things that you need to achieve from the organization? And then how are you going to develop your people to have the capability and skills, whether or not they're the senior leaders or middle management or the frontline workers, to be able to achieve those goals? And so really at the essence, that was the focus of Kanpro. Then there were other, elements that are really helpful and enabling, which were how do you communicate more effectively? They decided that using A3 paper to be able to make thinking visible and tell a concise story was going to be the process by which they did that. How did they ensure that the senior managers or the senior executives were connecting with and providing that coaching role to model the behavior and emphasize the behaviors and culture that they wanted to develop? So I would say, if you bring it back to more of the fundamentals rather than the manifestation or how things actually looked, this can fit for any organization who is wanting to improve and to achieve goals and also create more of a people-centered learning organization.
So just validate what I have learned from this session is that Kanpro program is when the leaders, meaning the top management, actually sets the direction, gets a strategy, and they become the facilitators to coach, train, educate the middle level and communicate with them as to what are the gaps, and they fill in the gaps so that the top management goal or the organizational goals are percolated down the line, and then they support the junior executives at the middle management level, and wherein they give you a safety net so that even if you try and it is not that giving the stretch target and motivating them and stretching them, and while doing that always be with them. So you lead from the front and then you step back and ask them to grow and saying that we support your back. Am I right?
Yes.
I'm not a bad student, Katie, am I? That's
it's easier to say and harder to do because this is the art of leadership and the art of management, about how do we do all of this more effectively. And this is where we all have opportunities, we all have strengths, we all have opportunities to grow and improve ourselves. I like to say that we're all business conditions that require improvement. So the actions that if we're in an organization or in a business, the actions that each of us take impact the organizational or business outcomes that we're seeing. So what role do our actions take in influencing or contributing to those outcomes? So no, we don't just look at processes, we have to look at our own actions too.
So all what we are saying is, there's a program which has been done, has been effective in Toyota. We are giving you the basic essence of how it was conducted. It is for you to adapt the way you want to adapt in your organization, in your environment, but take the main principles of it and you can tailor make it that suits your organization. Right?
Absolutely. And I would say that's with all of the principles that underlie continuous improvement as well. It's about taking the principles and creating the tools and the structures and the process that meet your needs in your organization. So lead with principles and not with necessarily the copying exactly what someone else has done, because that's what's working in their organization. But what are the underlying principles that can help you then create the right structures to help you and your organization?
Great. Now, where am I? We have at the end of our discussions, but where do I get the stop recording?
Oh, I would love to share something with your,
Ah,
yeah.
I have not stopped recording, so you can speak.
Great. So I know you and I were talking about this earlier, and how
Yeah.
your sensei always talks about this too. And I think it's really important to emphasize to people that continuous improvement isn't just process improvement. It's about how do we, that comes from these symbols, self and whip, that create the word change. And then actually this is sheep and altar. And so it's about sacrifice. It's about looking at ourselves and making that improvement as well for the good as well. So I think it's really important. And to remember that learning's never perfect and it's never complete. So this is about what it's all about. So I'd love to connect with everyone in your audience as well, to continue the discussion, read the book, reach out to me as well, and a special invitation to join my Leading to Learn Accelerator if you loved being part. Oh, your Darumas too. Here, look at I even have Daruma sticky notes.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. And it's on my computer, back in my computer too. I have a 10-week program that's starting in the middle of October, and it's called the Leading to Learn Accelerator. And I'm really thrilled to have a group of people, leaders at all levels from around the globe, coming together to really do what we just did, which is dive into the different stories of the book and how they can apply to you in your organization. So reach out to me if you have any questions on that. And of course, connect with me anywhere. So thank you, Dr. M, for inviting me here to talk about the book.
I honestly give you, you're a guest of honor. I give you the permission to stop recording. You can't stop it. Because you're the host, you can stop recording.
Okay.
Have you stopped recording?
I
will stop.
No,
I will stop.
I can't stop recording.
Okay. I'm still the host.
Okay. All right. I can't stop recording, but it's all right. You can just end it. You can just end it, and then you can edit. You can splice the video.
That's what I said. That I have not. I made you a co-host, but I am the host, so I am going to stop recording.
Yes,